You break your leg. There is no hospital, no x-ray, no painkillers waiting in a cabinet. Just you, your tribe, and whatever the land around you can offer. For most of human history, this wasn't a nightmare scenario. This was simply what getting hurt meant. For roughly 300,000 years, humans lived and died without a single pill, a single stitch of modern medicine, a single trained doctor. And yet we're here. Your ancestors survived infections, broken bones, childbirth, and plagues you've never heard of. How? The answer isn't luck, it's knowledge, passed down so carefully that some of it still works today. Let's start with pain and infection, because those killed more early humans than almost anything else. A small cut in the wrong environment could turn deadly within days. So early humans became, in a very real sense, chemists, not with lab coats, with trial, error, and memory stretching back generations. Consider Ötzi, the 5,300-year-old mummy discovered frozen in the Alps in 1991. Researchers examining his remains found something remarkable tucked into his gear. A fungus called Piptoporus betulinus, birch polypore. This fungus has natural antibacterial properties. Scientists believe Ötzi carried it deliberately, likely as a wound treatment or to fight intestinal parasites, since his remains also showed signs of whipworm infection. Think about that. Over 5,000 years ago, a man walking through the mountains was already carrying his own medicine kit. This wasn't unique to Ötzi. Archaeological evidence stretches back even further into a species that predates modern humans entirely. At Shanidar cave in northern Iraq, archaeologist Ralph Soletki uncovered Neanderthal remains alongside clusters of pollen from plants with known medicinal properties, including yarrow and centaurea. The find, now known as the flower burial, sparked decades of debate. Some researchers argue the pollen arrived by accident, carried by burrowing rodents. Others maintain it points to something more deliberate. What's clear from other Shanidar remains is even more striking. One skeleton, known as Shanidar 1, shows healed fractures, a withered arm, and evidence of blindness in one eye. This individual survived severe injuries for years. That kind of survival doesn't happen alone. Someone fed him. Someone protected him. Someone treated his wounds well enough that infection didn't finish what the injury started. So how? What did that care actually look like? Picture a small group moving through a river valley. Someone gashes their leg on a rock. The bleeding is bad. An older woman in the group, the one who has watched dozens of injuries before, moves quickly. She presses crushed leaves into the wound. Plants she knows sting less and heal faster, learned from her mother, who learned it from hers. She binds the leg with strips of hide. The group slows down. They don't abandon the injured. They carry weight for them, share food with them, wait for the fever to break. This wasn't sentimentality, it was strategy. A group that keeps its members alive keeps its knowledge alive too. Broken bones tell a similar story, and they tell it in exacting detail because bone remembers. When a bone breaks and heals badly, twisted or unset, it leaves a permanent record. When a bone breaks and heals straight, that's a record too. Anthropologists studying skeletal remains from Neanderthal and early Homo sapiens populations have found healed fractures that set almost perfectly aligned. A poorly set leg heals crooked, shortened, often useless for walking or running. A well-set leg heals straight. Straight healing doesn't happen by accident. It requires someone to pull the limb back into position, hold it still for weeks, and stop the person from moving on it too soon. That means splints. That means constant care. That means someone staying behind with the injured instead of moving on with the group's food supply. In a world where every calorie mattered, that decision was not casual. It was a statement about who counted as worth saving. And some of that knowledge went further than plants and bandages. Far further, in fact, than most people assume. Trepanation, the practice of drilling or scraping a hole into the human skull, sounds like something no one could survive. Yet archaeologist John Verano, who has spent decades studying ancient Peruvian skeletons, found something startling. Many trepanned skulls show clear signs of bone regrowth around the opening. That means the patient lived, sometimes for years afterward. Verano's research suggests ancient surgeons using tools of stone and obsidian understood enough about the skull to relieve pressure from swelling or head trauma, and they refined the technique over centuries. Survival rates in some regions and time periods were estimated above 70%. For a surgery performed without anesthesia, without sterilization as we understand it today, that number is almost impossible to believe. And yet, the bones don't lie. Head surgery wasn't the only place ancient hands worked with startling precision. At Mehrgarh, an early farming settlement in what is now Pakistan, researchers led by Roberto Macchiarelli examined teeth dating back roughly 9,000 years and found something no one expected. Tiny, neat holes drilled directly into the enamel, aimed precisely at decayed areas. This wasn't decoration. It wasn't accidental damage. It was dentistry. Someone in that community understood that a rotting tooth caused pain, understood roughly where the rot lived inside the tooth, and had developed a tool, likely a bow drill normally used for beadwork, precise enough to bore into a surface as small and hard as a molar. Multiple teeth from multiple individuals showed the same technique. That's not one lucky guess. That's a practice skill, taught and repeated. Think about what that means. Before writing, before metal tools in some cases, before anyone had a word for bacteria or cavity, someone had already worked out that drilling into the source of the pain could relieve it. And it worked well enough that people kept doing it and kept surviving it. Childbirth deserves its own place in this story because it was, for most of human history, one of the most dangerous events a human body could go through. Anthropologist Marjorie Shostak spent years living among the Juhuansi San people of the Kalahari, and her account of a woman named Nisa remains one of the most detailed records of how a hunter-gatherer society actually approaches birth. Births weren't left to chance. Older women who had given birth many times before attended almost every labor, watching for signs of trouble, knowing which positions eased a difficult delivery, knowing when to intervene and when to simply wait. This knowledge wasn't written anywhere. It lived entirely in the bodies and memories of women who had done this before, over and over, for their entire adult lives. When something went wrong, that accumulated experience was often the only thing standing between a mother and a fatal outcome. So picture that scene too. A woman in labor, surrounded not by machines, but by other women who have done this dozens of times. One holds her steady. One watches the timing of contractions and murmurs when to push and when to rest. One has already prepared a soft space, water, something to bite down on. There is no monitor beeping in the background. There are hands, memory, and complete attention. Here's a detail that surprises most people. The human body itself came preloaded with some of its own defenses, and ancient humans learned to work with them rather than against them. Fever feels like something going wrong. For most of history, it was often treated as the enemy. But fever is, in many cases, the body's own weapon, raising internal temperature specifically to slow down the reproduction of harmful bacteria and viruses. Groups that learn to let a mild fever run its course, keeping the person hydrated and warm rather than trying to force the fever away entirely, were often working with biology instead of against it, even without understanding why. This is the counterintuitive twist buried inside the bigger one. Ancient humans weren't only inventing solutions from scratch. Sometimes the smartest thing they did was recognize when the body already had a plan and simply support it. This is where the larger counterintuitive twist comes into full view. We tend to imagine ancient humans as helpless against illness and injury, waiting for modern science to save them retroactively. But that gets it backward. Ancient humans weren't passive victims of a dangerous world. They were active, careful, generational problem solvers. Every plant tested for fever. Every wound treatment refined by watching what worked and what didn't. Every surgical technique passed hand to hand, skull to skull, tooth to tooth, until it became reliable enough to trust with a life. None of this means ancient medicine was safe by our standards. Infections still killed. Childbirth was often fatal. Many treatments failed. And for every skull that shows healed bone regrowth around a trepanation site, there are others that show no healing at all, meaning the patient didn't survive the procedure. But the failures taught lessons too, and those lessons accumulated. A body of knowledge grew slowly, brutally, over hundreds of generations, refined by watching who lived and who didn't, until early humans had built something we rarely give them credit for: a functioning medical system, built entirely from observation, memory, and care, passed from one set of hands to the next. Here's the modern mirror. Right now, some of your favorite medicines trace their roots directly back to these ancient discoveries. Aspirin's active compound was first isolated from willow bark, a remedy used for pain and fever long before written history. Modern antibiotics research has drawn inspiration from natural antimicrobial compounds similar to the ones in Ötzi's birch fungus. Even the basic principle behind modern trauma care, stabilize the wound, prevent infection, let the body do the rest, is something Shanidar's caretakers understood without a single textbook. Even modern dentistry, with its drills and precision, echoes something a community at Mergar had already figured out 9,000 years earlier. Find the source of the pain and go directly to it. You live in a world of emergency rooms, antibiotics, and same-day surgery. It's easy to forget that none of it appeared overnight. It's the end product of hundreds of thousands of years of humans refusing to let each other die without a fight, testing what worked on the only laboratory they had: each other and their own bodies. Every modern doctor, whether they know it or not, is standing on a foundation built by people who never once saw a microscope. So the next time you take a painkiller or clean a cut with something from your medicine cabinet, remember what came before it? Remember the crushed yarrow at Shanidar cave? Remember the fungus wrapped in Ötzi's pouch? Remember the splinted legs of the injured carried by groups who refused to move on without them? Remember the drilled teeth at Mergar and the women who sat beside Nisa through her labor? Remember the healed skulls of ancient Peru, proof that people survived what should have killed them because someone, somewhere, knew exactly what to do. You break your leg, there is no hospital, no x-ray, no painkillers waiting in a cabinet, but there is a tribe. And for 300,000 years, that was enough.